I think we're live and good to go, yeah?
Oh, okay.
Hello.
Hello. It is such a joy to actually see you and talk to you. I feel like we've been tweeting at each other.
Yeah.
I read your book so long ago because I read it in ARC. I have the ARC, the Precious ARC here, and so I feel like this is the culmination of many months of fanning. So I'm very delighted to meet you.
That's such a huge compliment because I am such a huge admirer of yours. So even just being able to thank you for taking this opportunity to even talk and be on this with me. I'm so excited and I'm so thrilled to talk to you about Cemetery Boys and to have everyone here. It's very exciting.
So I have some just sort of Halloweeny questions. First, let's start out with and make it clear, Halloween, Dia de Muertos, not the same thing. But this is our sort of pre-Halloween party. So I thought I would start out, first of all, for those of you who don't know, I'm guessing you all do, but this is the awesome Aiden Thomas, writer of Cemetery Boys, holding up the B&N special edition.
It's so pretty.
I actually really need to have that.
It's so shiny.
I'm very excited at this moment. It was longlisted for a National Book Award. It is a New York Times bestseller. And I feel like it has brought just an incredible story to so many people. It's given me so much joy to see this book take off, because I also feel very vindicated, because when I read it, I was like, oh, damn. I was like, this is going to be amazing. And I was like, my taste is impeccable. So
I am so glad that I could reinforce that for you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I believe you had said you had set up your ofrenda earlier.
Yeah, so I've kind of started setting it up. It kind of depends on where you're from when you kind of kick in Dia de Muertos. But for me, I start celebrating on midnight on Halloween, which makes Halloween even more exciting. So I've got like the preliminary setup, but there's still a lot more that's going to go into it. But I can share what it looks like.
So I'm seeing.
So we have the pan. Yes. Pan de Muerto, which is an absolute must. This is a sugar skull I actually decorated during an interview recently that I did for Julian specifically.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Yeah, one of my very few like explicit talents is decorating calaveras. I'm really good at it. And then for this year, I'm celebrating my cousin who passed away actually while I was drafting Cemetery Boys. Wow. And I have my little alebrije over here. I have my mezcal ready, and then I have my candles, and of course, St. Jude. And those who've read the book know the significance of St. Jude. So yes. Yeah, it's still a work in progress, but it's getting there. I'm very excited. It's my favorite holiday.
Growing up in Los Angeles, I had a lot of friends who celebrated Dia de Muertos. They didn't, and I guess here in Hollywood, it's often Dia de Muertos. But we would celebrate, like, it was honestly just a joy to be brought along. And when my dad passed, it was actually a friend of mine brought me to Hollywood Forever for like the big, crazy.
Yeah.
It's like huge stuff, right? Like more like just a big party.
Totally.
That whole conversation, that whole a very different approach to death, I think, than sort of the American way of death, the European way of death. Very different way of sort of looking at it. And I think for me, actually, I was really grateful to sort of be brought into that discussion, because it changed the way I thought about my father's passing.
It's really special. And I think that's kind of one of the interesting conundrums of Cemetery Boys, is that on the surface, it's a book about death and about ghosts. And so I think inherently people are like, oh, that's going to be scary and sad. But instead, it's this really kind of lighthearted and warm book. And I feel like at the end of it, you should feel happy and hopeful. So just like, so it's really interesting, like those two different perspectives. Like for us, death is not the end, and it's not necessarily a sad thing. Of course, we mourn those who passed, but for us, death doesn't mean losing them. We remember them and we honor them and we welcome them back once a year at least, and yeah, I think there's really something special and beautiful about that, and just kind of it can be really healing for the mourning and grieving process.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a really special holiday for me, and I love it. And it's been so cool to write a whole book and a whole magic system that's based on it.
It's an incredible magic system, by the way. Like, it is one of
yeah.
the, it's very rich. It's very natural, though. Like, I never felt like I was being like clobbered by like, now allow me to show you my beautiful world building. Like, it felt very story. I should tell everybody we're gonna do questions at the end. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and they'll be yanked out and given to us so that we can answer the end. No spoilers, please. I know it's a book club chat, but we didn't advertise for spoilers, and I would hate to ruin this incredibly beautiful, emotional book. But which is also, okay, so one thing that stood out to me was the promise of fun. Okay, this is something as a writer and a reader. I feel like in fantasy, there's been this movement toward the bleak, right? Like, let's be edgy, let's be gritty, you know? That's right. But, and there certainly is a lot of darkness in this book, but I felt from the Wonderwall joke, I was like, this book has a lot of fun in it. And I would love to know sort of what your journey was, both in terms of developing the magic system, but also the tone of the book, because you're dealing with some very weighty stuff. But I never felt like you were sort of beating me up. I felt a sense of hope through the whole story.
Yeah, so I think for me in writing Cemetery Boys, it all kind of harkens back to how Dia de Muertos is celebrated, and kind of what it means, at the message at its core, right? So while it's on the surface, just like Cemetery Boys, it should be kind of scary and sad. It's not. It's supposed to be warm and fun and hopeful. And so when I was coming up with like the magic system and like setting the tone, like this book is very much, I mean, it's obviously about a queer trans Latinx boy, and queer trans Latinx folks right now are going through it, let's say. And a lot of kids and young adults are growing up in a society that pushes a lot of hate towards them, and who wants to like really just beat them down and make them feel low and make them feel like they don't have hope. So when I was writing this book, it was all coming from the perspective of, I want to write a book where these identities, these kids can see themselves, and they can see themselves being successful. They can see themselves being powerful, having control over a situation that they're in, but also being loved and supported for who they are without question. And so for me, that was the most important part of this book. I'm dealing with heavier topics, but my goal is to give readers a sense of belonging and connection, and to make them feel good and to make them feel powerful. So that was the most important thing for me for writing this book. And it just so happens I like writing comedy also. So I was very cognizant about making sure that even when we have these dark points in the book, I'm still bringing back in the lightness. Like this book, I'm happy to say it without me thinking of it as spoilers, like it has a happy ending. It's a happily ever after book, because that's what these kids and these readers need right now.
So this is a fan question.
Okay.
Is there any chance we would, because this is a complete story, but it feels like a very rich world.
Yeah.
Like, would we ever get a spin-off, say, for Maritza?
I would. So like, let's talk about Maritza, right? Just
yes,
for a
please,
second.
Let's do.
I love how everyone loves her so much. And I think what's really important about her is that when I was writing her, let me backtrack. At one point early on in this whole thing, I had an interview question that was, oh, who was your Maritza when you were growing up? And the answer was, I didn't have one. I didn't have anyone that was close enough to me. I didn't have anyone that I trusted like that. And I didn't have anyone that I felt who would have my back in a really like unwavering way that Maritza does. So Maritza is important because she is this wish fulfillment character for myself, but also for, I think, a lot of trans and queer kids, that friend that you can have who will have your back, who is like your real ride or die, and who supports you and loves you, and is like, when things are really hard for you, they step in shoulder some of that weight to like help you get through it.
I love too, though, that she's not just perfect. You know, she's not. This is somebody with edges and an agenda and wants of her own, as opposed to just sort of occupying the friend role.
Right.
I felt also like maybe she's a model for how to be like a proper ally, especially as you're growing up. You don't quite like, you have not been entrenched in the woke culture yet, and like you know, like so that you can be there for people in a not just a supportive way, but like almost like a like you're their army kind of way.
Absolutely. That's a perfect way of putting it. And I think that's what makes Maritza so impactful on readers. And yeah, she's the wish fulfillment character, but she's also kind of the modeling the behavior of what it means to be a good ally, because Yads has people in his life, you know, his literal blood family who are not taking care of him. And to kind of to show the like well-meaning family members who are like, well, I'm doing all this effort, but you're still messing up when it comes to pronouns or dead naming, and kind of showing how that impacts Yads internally was really important. And then to have Maritza be like, this, if you want to be a good ally, this is what that looks like. So to go back to the original question, Maritza is Afro-Latina. So I would not be in the position to write a book from her perspective. That isn't to say that someone else couldn't write a book from her perspective, or that there's my brain is like an encyclopedic knowledge of the world of Cemetery Boys. So there is plenty of stuff up there to come up with more content within this world and even within these characters. Nothing is official right now, but yeah, I'm not ready to let them go to the wayside without having, you know, some extras.
There's a lot to build there. Like I would love to see that. I'd love to see some graphic novels. I would love to see it on TV.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there's just so much to draw on, and to keep, there's some worlds you feel like if anybody starts poking it, it's going to fall apart, you know? You know, it's like, oh, what a nice town. And then you like open a door and the whole thing falls down. But this, I felt like to keep exploring, and, you know, the world felt very large, even though, and this isn't, so you're in LA, right?
I'm in, right. So I was born and raised in California, but I live in Portland right now. Oh. And I spend a lot of time in East LA.
So, you know, I feel like in some ways it felt very contained in the way that your life is when you're a teenager, but you had the sense much wider network of people and power structures. Yes. The thing I thought was interesting about the family dynamic, and then I swear we'll get to some fun Halloween questions. I'm just have you here, so I need to know. I felt like, you know, there was this push and pull between the warmth of this family environment and still this sense of acceptance that was qualified, you know, like, and you said you didn't have a Maritza growing up, but can you talk about building that family structure and sort of where you wanted to put conflict, where you were pushing back against, I think maybe some trauma narratives that I think people like to, you know, just see from marginalized characters?
Yeah, totally. So I feel like with a lot of trans stories, especially in the young adult spectrum, the family reaction is one of two extremes. You either have that they are perfect allies, and as soon as like their kid comes out, they're like, I know exactly what to do, and I have behaved correctly, you know, this entire time. And then there's the other side where it's the family automatically rejects them, they hate them or whatever, they kick them out of the house, which is incredibly traumatic. And there's not a lot in the middle. So when I was writing Cemetery Boys, I wanted to write more about my personal experience, especially within a Latinx culture, which brings on a whole other set of complications and nuance. So I wanted to present a family where they don't hate Yadriel because of who he is. They don't reject him. It's that they don't understand him, and they don't have the resources or tools to be able to know like what to do. They're so stuck in their ways and like having their lives run as it's always been run without like questioning it, because it's just what you do. There's no real explanation. If you poke at it too much, then everyone's like, well,
like
I don't know.
The gender binary adjustment.
Yeah, exactly. All of a sudden, everything falls apart. Now, what are we doing with that? So yeah, so I really wanted to show the complicated nuance of it, right? So you have Lita, the grandmother, who thinks that she's doing a really good job. She's like, blah, blah, blah. Like, yes, I get it. That's your name, but still messes up on pronouns. Still is like, oh, but you'll always be my little girl, which is, so horrible to have be said to you. But from her perspective, she's doing the right thing. She's like, yeah, I'm making these moves that you're asking me to, but to see the internal repercussions of how that affects Yads is something that I think is important to parents or family members of trans kids who make those microaggressions or just straight up aggressions and don't realize how it's impacting their loved one, because a lot of it just gets internalized and we just keep quiet and we just kind of take it. So that was really important to me. I wanted it to be complex, and I wanted to show the like nuance that comes with it. And then on top of it, to be a Latinx person whose family, their native tongue is literally a gendered language. It comes with a lot more pitfalls. So for me, it was really important to give a much more complicated and nuanced family structure. I didn't want it to be, one of those really polar opposites. I wanted to show how difficult and tricky it can be.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna segue us a little bit to
okay.
stuff because I want to.
Yes.
So and these were actually questions that were like Halloween submitted to us for both of us. What were you scared of as a kid?
Okay, I was terrified. There's like a story. I was terrified of wolves as a kid, and I will explain. Like I grew up in Oakland,
we don't have
California.
those in LA.
There's not wolves. Yeah, there's no wolves. But when I was little, my grandparents I have an older sister. They got us a Peter and the Wolf book, a picture book that came with like the cassette tape to age myself. Yes. That like played the music. And it terrified me. Like it was a beautifully illustrated book, but the wolf was so scary. Yep. And my sister saw that moment of weakness. And so she would tell me that if I ever lied, I would be eaten by a wolf. So she was bringing in the boy who cried wolf into this whole situation. And my mom realized how terrified I was. So she took the book and the cassette and she hid it, and she kept hiding it, but my sister would keep finding it and pull it out and would play the music. So I'm also deeply traumatized by the sound of a French horn, because that's the instrument of the wolf.
Dun, dun, dun. Wait.
Yeah. So wolves, I was absolutely terrified of.
Wow. I am still terrified of sharks. Like I am terrified of sharks. And it's because I'm sure because I saw Jaws when I was really too young.
Oh yeah.
To see it. But I'm the kind of person who even in a swimming pool will like not lie on a raft, because I'm like, I don't know, it could swim through the drain and find me. And you don't know. You don't know. You don't know.
Point. That's very valid.
Thank you very much. What are you afraid of now?
I'm still afraid of wolves. Like I'm very afraid of them.
I like that you're whispering as if they're waiting. Like they're just like, whoa, Adrian's still afraid of us. Let's go get it.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm still very creeped out by them. But like I really like reading about like werewolves and stuff like that. So it's a very specific kind of like scary mouth shape that wolves do. Yeah, I'm still.
So not like failure.
No,
no, none of them like taxes. Wolves. Just the fear of wolves.
I pay people to deal with my taxes. Like I have acknowledged that I am not smart enough. Yeah, I'm not smart enough to figure that out. So I gotta pay someone to do it.
To deal with wolves too. They will just stand outside of your house, beat a pan with
Maybe that's what I need.
I'm saying like
yeah.
Okay.
What are you scared of now, though? No, you need to answer it.
I don't know. So many things. I'm still afraid of sharks. I really hate blimps. Like I hate
blimps.
Yeah, I find them like stealthy and frightening. Like
they're a very looming presence.
They're too big. They loom. There's something about blimps that I find unnerving, if not frightening.
That's very valid.
Thank you. You never know when one it might be outside of your window. But I think as I've gotten older, my fears have become much more boring. They're not like sharks. I used to, there were two-headed dragons in my closet, like when I was a kid. I don't know where they came from, like that's fun. Now I'm just kind of like this like existential angst, like, oh, I will age and die before I've created my masterwork or some crap.
I'm terrified of asking cashiers questions. That's a pretty bad one for me.
Oh, that could be.
That's.
I am actually still terrified of math. Like,
well, me too. Math is awful. Math is literally the worst thing in the universe.
And this is across languages as well. Like, I've never been able to learn to tell the time in a foreign language or like make change. I'm always like, just keep it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what to do with that. So
no, I have no idea. Let's talk about your best Halloween costume ever and your worst Halloween costume ever.
Best Halloween costume ever. I guess the one that I was like most excited about and like just like my heart was so happy. When I was young, I think I was in first grade. Power Rangers were a big thing. And I wanted to be a Power Ranger so bad. And I was in Spirit, whatever one was open in Oakland at that time, with my mom. And it's interesting because I was like, in first grade, you're like still kind of like a little kid, but also kind of like starting to be towards like a proper like big kid. And my mom found a unicorn costume and she really wanted me to be the unicorn. And I loved unicorns, but I also really wanted to be a Power Ranger. And I wanted to be the Red Ranger, but we settled on the Pink Ranger. And I was so happy and I loved it so much. And it came with this set of gloves that when you, there was like little buttons on the inside. So when you pushed it, it would be like, and make like prodding noises. Yeah. They were like the coolest thing.
Fun fact, when I was a youth, I was really into martial arts. And they came to my dojo and were like, and had us audition for a show. And that show was, I auditioned to be Rainy, the Yellow Power Ranger.
Oh my God. That is so cool.
No, it's really not. It's really not. Somewhere there is I really hope it's been destroyed, but somewhere there's a young, very awkwardly, like, showing her moves. like her weird like outfit, like not good at all. But yes, that is my connection to the Power Rangers. Okay, that is a beautiful costume. What is your worst? What was your biggest costume fail?
Gosh, I feel like there's a couple of them. And I'm gonna say one year my best friend wanted to be a genie and she wanted me to be a genie with her. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll be a genie if that's what makes you happy. Which is, of course, like deeply problematic now. But she wanted to put like, it wasn't hair dye because I think we were still in elementary school. But do you remember that like color spray that you could put in your hair?
Absolutely.
Okay, so she was like, I want this in my hair. So I was like, cool, go ahead. And so we put this color stuff in our hair and then it poured all of Halloween. So we were out walking around and I just had like dye like dripping down the sides of my face.
Oh,
it was yeah. We were freezing. Yeah, it was like sticky and like gross because that stuff is like
it's awful. It's just pure chemicals, and it's never such a disappointment. You thought you were gonna look like the person on the bottle, and then your hair was just crispy and
yeah.
So when I was a kid, I wanted to go as a pumpkin for Halloween.
Yes.
And my mom worked full time, but she was like, I'm going to sew you. Back then, like everybody had a sewing machine. And she was like, I'm going to sew for you this pumpkin. Except it just didn't look like a pumpkin. It was like sort of sad and saggy. And the clothes were falling. And this should tell you about my mother. She put a sign on me that said 5 cents discount squash. So discount squash. That was me.
That's incredible.
Talk
That's
about
possibly the best thing
trauma.
I've ever heard.
Okay. Trauma.
So,
Okay.
oh my gosh.
So we're starting to get questions. If you have questions,
Okay.
again, add them to the chat. So this first one is from Elena. Do you both have any favorite October or Halloween traditions you turn to every year?
Oh yeah. What's yours?
You know, I've been traveling the last few years on Halloween. So
Oh.
it's mostly just, you know, I've been away from home. But to no one's surprise, it is one of my favorite holidays. So there's always costuming. I'd like to say this is just for Halloween, but there's a whole room full of costumes.
I love it.
Witches' hats and who knows what else. Like I was like, I don't really have to decorate for Halloween. It's already done. And also, you know, we can't do it this year, but when I was in town, we would always do at some point in October, we called it the Psyched Spider Party, but it was, you know, taking cider and put some Grand Marnier in it. And
yeah.
There are children watching, don't do that. But, you know, things like that. Like there's always parties, but I have to admit, adult Halloween parties, I feel like are always just a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta, yeah, because if there's anybody who's like not super into it, it kind of brings down the mood, right? You have to have like the real fanatics.
And I think also, you know, you reach a certain age where it's like half your friends have kids and are just like, oh, we gotta trick or treat and then we're going to sleep. And then you have other friends who are like, I just got divorced and I got a party. And you're like, oh, Gary, calm down, put down the solo. You know, like there's complications as opposed to like the pure joy of just candy and costumes. Yeah. Like I miss that.
Totally.
Kind of do. How about you?
I'm very much a child at heart, so I still carve a pumpkin every year. I haven't carved it this year yet. It's actually right there in my kitchen.
The victim.
Yeah. And I think just kind of gathering pumpkins in general, I get very emotionally attached to things very easily. I'm a Cancer and I'm a very soft soul. So I like bought 3 tiny pumpkins because like I saw them in the grocery store and I was like, yeah, I want one of these. And so I picked one up and I was like, he's gonna be lonely. So I got another one. And then I was like walking around the grocery store. And then there was like a pumpkin that someone like left on like a random aisle. And he has like kind of like, you know, like scars on his face. Again, I'm immediately personifying a freaking pumpkin. And I was like, were you left here because they thought you were ugly? And I was like, okay, well now I have to bring food home. So I have
walking out of the store with like 32 pumpkins being like, I love you all.
It's really bad. I love you all equally. Yeah. So I have 3 like this size pumpkins around my apartment.
That is awesome.
So that's common. So pumpkins are big. And my absolute favorite thing to watch for Halloween is Ichabod, so Sleepy Hollow, the Disney version.
Yeah.
The little cartoon. It's my favorite. I think I've watched it like 5 times already.
For me, it's Nightmare Before Christmas, which I guess is technically
solid,
but the aesthetic is so beautiful and so
yeah, so
and
good.
Also, like, classic. From a spiritual level, it's also like this is the harvest time. This is the winnowing, and like I think it's a really good time to sort of like the costumes and everything are a lot of fun, but it's also a really good time to sort of center yourself and think about what you're leaving behind in the year and what you're looking to get in the year. And damn, this has been a year, so some introspection. Hilariously, Michaela asked you, how many pumpkins did you get emotionally attached to this year? Knows you?
Really 4. Which is pretty good. Usually I get a lot more smaller ones.
It's a process. Dylan Mariah asks, what part of the book was the most fun to write?
That's a very good question. One of the parts that kind of got away from me completely, and I just started writing so much, and my editor was like, Aiden, you have spent like 10 pages just talking about what the cemetery looks like during Dia de Muertos. So that part was really fun and it kind of got like out of control. But I think the like classic, what was my favorite was chapter 3, where Julian is summoned. So where you really officially meet the like trio
And it's such like a crash course in their personalities and also how they relate to each other. It was really fun. That was probably like the funnest scene to write for sure.
What was the hardest one to write? Nobody asked them. I'm just asking that.
The end. I think I am very bad at writing endings. And so I always struggle with them really intensely. And yeah, I don't want to say any spoilers.
No spoilers.
When things go really bad, the darkest night of the book, let's call it, that moment was really difficult to write. And to I wanted to make sure I was hitting it the right way. So that was a challenge. It took some time and it took a lot of rewrites.
Third acts, I feel like, are, especially because you have to write them to know the shape of the book and to really know what you're building to, so that you can go back and make it clear that that's what you were building to.
Yes, right, exactly.
But
so much pressure.
But then you really end up and there's so much choreography in battle scenes, and to make sure that you get that nailed, but also that they have heart is quite a challenge. Yeah. Revision.
Yeah.
I try to say this because I know there's writers listening, and I'm always like, it's not about the drafting, it's about the revision.
Yeah.
Sovereign Novel said, did you curate a playlist when you were writing Cemetery Boys? If so, what song represents this book best?
Yeah, so I have a YouTube playlist that's, I think, 59 songs at this point. Yeah, I know. I use music to help set the mood for what I'm writing. And so for each of my books, I have a playlist that has like songs that remind me of scenes or the overall tone. But then I also have songs that are specifically like for Julian and specifically for Yads. And so it's really funny if you kind of just listen through the playlist. It's incredibly chaotic because it's music that I like, all of it, but it's like the really like obnoxious like reggaeton that Julian is in love with, that I am also in love with, and then it'll all of a sudden like hard smash cut to like Khalid songs that like Yads really loves. So it's really chaotic. But for a song that I think reminds me of the book most, it's East Side by Benny Blanco, Halsey, and Khalid. And I heard it when I was like coming up with ideas for Cemetery Boys. I was driving around and it came on and I was like, oh my gosh, this would be a really good scene in the book. And so that song is actually like 3 chapters in the book towards the end where they go to Malibu. Yeah, so you can like listen to that song and it's pretty much just kind of walking you through what happens in that.
That is definitely like a when I find a song that really locks in for me, I do listen to it just again and again and again.
Yeah, totally.
And it kind of ruins the song for me in the long term. And there's also sort of a PTSD attached to it. Like if I hear it when I'm out or something, I'm like, I should be working, you know. But yeah, music is a powerful inspiration method. Okay, Maya Hassan asks, okay, they say, okay, first of all, congratulations on Cemetery Boys. It is such an incredible book. What inspired the magic system?
Great question. Also, thank you. The magic system, honestly, I kind of feel like I cheated, because when I was writing this book and I knew that I wanted everything to kind of relate back to Dia de Muertos and that was going to be like our time frame. It was really just taking parts of Dia de Muertos that we celebrate, that we believe in, and then just giving it a very literal like output. Like the easiest example would be marigolds are so important to the book and the magic system. And so for Dia de Muertos, we believe that having marigolds, their smell and their color attracts our loved ones back home. And when you do a sugarcane arch and you put marigolds around them, it creates like a literal gateway, that veil that they cross through from the afterlife back to this world. And so I really just took that and I carried it over to Cemetery Boys. And it was like, yes, they literally come back because of these marigolds. So I feel like I kind of got to cheat it, but it was also, I really just wanted it so steeped in that tradition and in that magic of our culture that it just like, that's what it needed to be. yeah, so that was the main inspiration for sure. And it was fun, and it was so like gratifying to put that part of our culture on display and to really just kind of shout it at everybody and be like, look at this, look at how beautiful it is. That was really fun. That was really great.
It feels so rooted, I think, because you drew from real life and because it has these ties
Yeah.
to things that I think people maybe know tangentially if they're not exposed to it. And so it resonates. There's like a conversation that happens between what the reader knows and what you're introducing them to.
Yes, totally.
Holly Lawson asks, what's the YA book that got you into reading YA? Interesting.
So probably when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to think of like the real first one. And I believe, yeah, it was definitely Howl's Moving Castle by Diane Wynne Jones.
Yes.
Like I still, it's so good. And I still have the first version that I bought. It's like a little like cheap
horrible cover.
It was the like sketchy cover.
The one with it's like the calcifer is like a weird green monster. Like, I don't know. It's one of the worst covers in all of fantasy. That is it's one of the touchstones books for most fantasy writers I know. And yet it's something that very few people, like they know the movie, which is completely different.
Yeah.
Beautiful movie, but completely different, but not the book.
Yeah. Yeah, the cover I have has like the castle actually looks like a castle. Like that's like in the hills. But it's like so beat up and like the pages are like have all yellowed and like the spine is just like falling apart. But yeah, that one was so good. And I think it really spoke to me in terms of like having humor within fantasy. Because that book is so funny and so well done. Yeah, that definitely was a big one.
Pick that up, do you feel like?
I was a very late reader. I was very adverse to reading, and it wasn't something that synced up with my learning style. So I didn't really get into reading until I was in middle school. So I was probably in 6th or 7th grade.
Yeah. Okay, so Susie Fox asks, what was your writing process? Did you do a detailed outline first, or did you just jump in? I'm super curious about this too, especially since you talked about struggling with the ending.
Yeah, so I love this question, and it's my opportunity to get on my soapbox about plotting and outlining. So Cemetery Boys was actually my option book. It was not the first book I wrote and sold. Yeah, a little tidbit. My first book, my technical debut book that I wrote was Lost in the Neverwoods, which is my dark Peter Pan retelling that's coming out in March. Yeah, and so when it came time to have like the option book discussion with my editor, I was like, here's some ideas. And I was really nervous about Cemetery Boys and just like even the prospect of like presenting it to someone, because I still felt like there wasn't room for people like me in publishing. I didn't think that I was marketable. So it was I sent her like 5 ideas. It was the last idea, and it was a paragraph long, and most of the sentences ended in question marks. I was like, and then like, maybe he's trans, and like, maybe it's like, Latinx. It was really asking permission if I could write about my identity, which is, a whole other discussion. But so what that means is that it got kind of fast tracked, and we wanted Cemetery Boys to come out first, and we wanted it to come out quickly. So I had to write the first draft in 6 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I did.
I'm afraid of as an adult. No, thank you.
So I was like, okay, I have to write this in 6 weeks. So what I did is I did an incredibly intense outline. I love plotting. My outlines kind of turned into 0 drafts. The final page count for the outline for Cemetery Boys was 52 pages. So it was incredibly long, but what made me able to write it in 6 weeks was having everything already laid out, really detailed. So when it came to actually writing, all I had to do was look at the list and write what it said. I didn't have to think. I didn't have to write myself into a corner. I knew every step that was happening. So I was able to write it quickly, and it was able to make sense without me getting like lost in the weeds somewhere. So yeah, I love plotting. and the outline is a very important and long process for me, but that's how I was able to kick it out so quickly.
That's fantastic. I mean, I outline, but I've never been able to write a book in 6 weeks. So, and I will. Katie asks, are any characters based off of real people in your life?
Real people in my life. Not super. One of my favorite things about building characters and kind of making sure that they're like unique is that I like to steal quirks from people that I know and put them into my characters. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things that I do that Yads does, that Julian does. Julian has this verbal tick where he will repeat things in threes, especially when he gets really excited. And that's something that I pulled from one of my best friends back in Oakland. Her older brother would do that. He'd be like, and I was trying to tell him, I was trying to tell him, I was trying to tell him. And then he would continue with his story. When he'd get really excited, it's like that verbal repeating in threes. So no one is like strictly based off. It's a lot of kind of like stealing cool things from other people that I see and putting them into characters. So they're all kind of a strange combination.
Yeah. I usually sort of start maybe with an inspiration from somebody, and then we veer wildly off from their personality pretty quickly. Jeff and I want to know if there's an adaptation in the works.
Who knows? I have not signed anything. Nothing is official. You know how publishing is, like.
Never have I wished to have a production company more, because I would make this in a heartbeat. I would be like, hello, get me the president of Hollywood on the line. Like, it's such a natural.
Well, dang it.
It's a natural.
You just take it. God, can you please like pivot your career path for me?
Somebody would please just give me power that I haven't earned. It would be great. Well, I mean,
so maybe in the future.
I'm just saying, I think it would be incredible. Did you, I never did this, but this is a question I've gotten a lot about, like, do you ever have actors in mind when you write? I mean, the truth of adaptation is, even if you do, by the time you get to the adaptation, it's unlikely that you would, do you have like a Pinterest board? Is there somebody whose voice speaks loudly? Oh, go on.
Oh, yeah. So, well, I think first of all, just to talk about Yadriel, the beautiful thing about him is that he is a trans boy who is also brown, and not a lot of them exist within media, especially like as an actor. So there's no one that I've found yet who would fit for him. But the really exciting thing is that hopefully sometime soon there will be someone. So that's exciting to think about. But for Julian, I had in my mind exactly like who he is. And do you watch On My Block at all? It's a really cool like teen series on Netflix that's based in LA, and it has a really diverse cast and it's awesome. But there is an actor, his name is Danny Ramirez, and that's who I pictured for Julian. Like when I have Julian in my head, I'm like, it's Danny Ramirez with his head shaved. Just incredibly handsome and really like beautiful Latinx features, like the really strong nose, the really beautiful like diamond shaped face and jaw. And I really wanted to have a love interest whose attractiveness and his beauty was steeped in him being Latinx. So he's like the perfect in my head who I vision when I think about Julian.
So we got this question. I'm hesitant to ask it, but I'm going to, because I feel like, as much as I hate to hear about writers having to rush their books, I do feel like this book arrived right at the right time for a lot of kids and adults. And so the question is, what are Yadriel and Julian's Hogwarts houses?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super into endorsing those books. What I can say, I feel like the Zodiacs work better for them, actually. Julian is very much like a chaotic Scorpio who is like, who is very much, he's very loyal, he's really intense, he's very impulsive. So I feel like that like suits him really well. And then you have, I feel like they're kind of different sides of the same coin, because Yads is also, he's very brave, but he's very nervous about being brave. And he's a Cancer. And so he is really like more reserved, and his bravery is like a much more kind of
your sign too. There's some
yeah.
very serious self-insert happening here. Oh, he's
well, see, it's funny because like he has my zodiac right, and like when people see him on the page just kind of written out, they're like, oh, a trans Latinx boy, like this is your self-insert. And I am actually much more a Julian. Like my brain, I can't sit still. Like even while we're talking, I have this toy that my friends got me to keep my hands busy. Otherwise I'd be like this the whole time. I am very kind of chaotic and ridiculous. So I definitely am more of a Julian, but on paper, Yads is kind of modeled after like how I would appear like on a piece of paper as well. But yeah, so they're both very brave, and they're both very loyal, but in very different ways. Julian's is very loud and in your face, while Yadriel's is more quiet, and like when something bad happens, Julian runs out to like defeat whatever the bad thing is. But for Yads, he retreats back and tries to check on the person who is affected by it and take care of them.
With his
so yeah,
gathered all the pumpkins just in
yes, all the pumpkins.
All the pumpkin children. I gotta ask, you know what Maritza's sign is? Because I love this as somebody who gets asked this all the time, you know, about like character designations. This is the pivot I'm going to steal from you. But what is Maritza's sign? Like,
Maritza is an Aquarius. She's very no nonsense. She's very smart, and she knows how to. She's like, there is one brain cell shared between the three of Yads, Maritza, and Jules, and it's Maritza's brain cell. So she's very thoughtful. She's very smart and clever, but at the same time, what I think is really fun about her is that she'll sit back and kind of watch you set yourself on fire, and will like let you do that, but then we'll step in and then like fix the problem and like get you out of the like hole you've dug yourself into before you're totally trapped. Yeah.
Put you in bed.
Yeah.
Okay. But
she's like, she's gonna let you like mess up, but she will ultimately be there to like
something I say to my friends a lot is sometimes you have to drive the bus off a cliff yourself. Like it doesn't matter what good advice you get. Sometimes it doesn't matter who stands in the road. Sometimes you just have to drive the bus off the cliff.
Exactly. And she knows good and well that she gives the best advice. And if you're not going to take it, she's going to let it play out. And then be like, oh, I told you so.
So we're basically at the end of our time. I'm going to end with a really important question. First of all, I want to remind everybody you can get the Barnes & Noble special edition.
And it's
at
so pretty.
or at your local Barnes & Noble. It is absolutely gorgeous, stunning, a great gift. So important question, favorite Halloween candy?
Okay, this is, okay. It's kind of out there.
If you say candy corn, we cannot be friends.
I'm trying to think of like, because there's like Mexican candy that I'm obsessed with, but specifically for Halloween, I love the little mini 100 grand bars, and it's like crispy chocolate with caramel in it, and it's so like specific and not like a popular candy. My mom rags on me.
Not something you go out and buy. You wouldn't be like, I'm gonna go buy some full-sized, grand bar. Like you just wait for Halloween.
Yeah, my mom is always ragging on me because she's like, you have very little demands, and like what makes you happy is very simple, but it's very hard to come by. So she's always hated getting me like birthday presents and stuff because it's like, well, I only want this one cheap thing, but you have to go find it.
People should have to work for your favor.
Yeah,
that's the way it should be.
It's true. And another really exciting part is that today is the 29th, and that is when Cemetery Boys begins. So if you haven't read Cemetery Boys, today is a good day to do it, because this is when it all starts.
You can be immersed in the fiction.
Yes.
Right now, you can be right there on October 29th. All right. On that note, Adrian, thank you for this beautiful book, and thank you for the very fun chat. And I hope when we're allowed to, we'll get to cross paths one of these days.
Yes. Thank you so much. This was so much fun. I super appreciate it.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, all.